So going into our Slant 6 build, I realized right off the bat, strategy is the name of the game. This may seem a little convoluted, right? But follow along, okay? The Slant 6 is deficient in two areas, okay? The first is it has a tiny little bore and it has a very long rod, which means that it's going to be very challenged to make low end torque. On the other end of the spectrum, it has a cylinder head that's just a cork. It's just a cork in the bottom. There's only so much you can do with this thing. Aside from the porting that we did and all of that, the bottom line is that the basic design of it, it's not going to make any power upstairs. So you've got an engine that's going to have to really, it's going to have to deliver everything in that middle ground. So strategy. Now remember, this is a drag car that we're building. And here's okay. We started this by saying, since the engine is so compromised, parasitic losses and weight are going to be crucial, like more so than on just about any other type of build. So conceptually, we started at the rear end. I know, it sounds crazy, right? But bear with me. The 7 1/4 Chrysler rear is known to be, it's a toy. They break. They have no oomph at all. Because they were designed as a low performance rear. And because they were designed as a low performance rear, they were designed for as little parasitic loss as possible. If you've ever taken a car that had a 7 1/4 and swapped it, let's say, to an 8 3/4, you'll notice right away. The first thing you notice about it is when you step on the gas, the car doesn't feel as peppy, it doesn't feel as lively, because you've got to turn that much more gear. So we decided since we're gonna go with parasitic loss and weight as the primary overall, strategy with building this car, that we were going to start with the 7 1/4 and then scale everything back on the car to where the 7 1/4 was going to be able to live. Like, for instance, they use them in pulling tractors, these little pulling tractors, because at 1,000 pounds, at 1,500 pounds, these rears are bulletproof. But you go to 3,000 pounds and you go to any type of horsepower right off the line, they break. So we scaled the whole project down to the scope of that 7 1/4. And that's why we've got our vehicle weight right now. She sits just at about 2,075 pounds, more or less. That's ready, that's fuel, oil, battery, the whole 10 yards, minus the driver. And I think we can even still get a little more weight out of it from there. But at that weight, the rear end will live. Now also, because it's so challenged down low, because of that tiny bore and the long rod, it's just a terrible, terrible architecture for drag racing. We decided, you know what? The 60-foot time does not exist in the world of this car. Why? Well, because if you're going for a 60, it means that you've got to stick the car and you got to use a big tire, okay? Or a bigger tire than you normally would. What that means is that after that initial hit on the starting line, you've got to carry a penalty. You got to carry the penalty of the weight and the parasitic loss of that larger tire. So rather than even think about the 60-foot time on this car, we're going to sacrifice it. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist. And we're going to focus on the 330. It's how this car is going to make it to the 330. All else being equal, a good 330 is going to equal a good 60. If we focused on the 60, it takes more power than this thing is going to make normally aspirated. It takes more rubber than it's going to take normally aspirated. But if we focus on the 330 and we get the car to move nice and hard from, let's say, 20 feet out, 30 feet out, all else being equal, we get a decent 330 out of it. It's going to be equivalent of a good 60. And we can do it all with minimal parts. And the same thing goes with that 3-speed transmission that we're using. The 3-speed, we're using the A903 3-speed, which is the lightest duty transmission of all. The thing, you can pick it up with one hand. It weighs like 65 pounds. It takes no power to turn it. We're sacrificing a gear, right? But that's okay. Since we've decided to throw away the bottom end, we're not making any power down low, and we're not going to make any power up top. We're going to do it all in that middle range there. That 3-speed and its gear spacing will work really well from like that 3,000 to 5,500 RPM range. So that's where we're at with this thing. And we got our comp cams worked us a deal. And so we decided to go with them for both this project and for Bottle Rocket. So here's the cam, okay? You get a look at this. It is nothing sexy, right? It's basically a 500 lift, 230 at 50, on a 110. It's nothing to get horny about, but it's going to give us that 3,000 RPM oomph that we're looking for with this. And 4 degrees advanced is the starting point. I have no idea where the cam is going to eventually want to be. I have no idea if this cam is even going to work. We won't know until we've actually sorted the car and got the rest of the tune-up in place. What the jetting is going to be, where the ignition is going to sit. We have to sort the whole thing out. But this cam right here, I believe, is the perfect starting point. It'll give us that 3,000 to 5,500 RPM muscle that we're looking for. All right, so matching with that cam, we decided to go with a set of stock spec 340 valve springs. It's a thin wire spring. It has a damper. It's actually overkill. It's more than we need given the weight of the valve and the RPM that we're going to turn this thing at. But the 340 valve fits the Slant 6 pocket just perfectly. You don't have to open it up, and there's no grinding that's necessary there. It just fits right in. And we crunched them down and crunched it down, and the wire is thin enough that, because the small block spring is 300 thousandths of an inch taller than the Slant 6. It's a 300 thousandths of an inch difference. And with this compressed all the way, there's no chance of coil bind. So these will do the trick. Now here's something, if you're following along at home, I'm going to save you a bunch of bent push rods ahead of time, right? Okay, so while mocking things up and screwing around, we found that maximum lift before you get into the valve guide, the top of the valve guide, is about 450 thousandths of an 450 lift cam. If anything more than a 450 lift cam, it's going to bury the retainer in the guide. So before you do anything else with these, take your guides and trim them down. We brought these things down about 100 thousandths of an inch. It's not rocket science. We can still get a seal over it. We took them down about 100 thousandths of an inch, and that'll give us more than enough, space in there. But keep that in mind if you're going to do one of these engines. Anything over like 450 lift, you have to, just take the top of the guides down. Parasitic losses. I remember reading a book by Bill Jenkins eons ago, and things stuck in my mind. And he was saying that they dynoed the comparison between a single timing chain, single row timing chain and a double row, and the single took less horsepower to turn. I don't know how much, I don't remember off the top of my head how much less horsepower to turn it takes, but it takes less horsepower. So we decided to go with a single on this. And this is actually the same timing set as you would buy for a low performance Chrysler, like a 3D3 2-barrel, right? Big block Chrysler, same timing set. So we decided to go with the single row on this. Head gaskets, okay. The steel shim gaskets like this one, this is copper coated already for a different motor, but you want to try to find some steel shim gaskets. And if you're going to be a Slant 6 guy, stockpile these things because they're not available anymore. Nobody makes them anymore. So you can find them in old stock here and there. And we found a couple of them and we got them stashed. So we use these. Most of the ones that are available are these composites. And this is it's a thin composite, right? It's Filpro. It's a thin composite, but it's still about 10 thousandths of an inch bigger diameter, bigger thickness, more thickness than the steel shim. So if you can, try to find those. What else did we want to talk about here? I think that's pretty much it for right now. I'm almost ready to assemble this engine. Basically, at this point, it's just going through and fine cleaning everything and prepping it all. And it's going to have to sit for a few weeks while we focus on Project Bottle Rocket, because right now that's our priority, to get that thing to the track and start sorting through this. So I would say probably be about 3 weeks or so before we actually do anything else with this engine. But I think that's it, right? For now. I'll see you tomorrow.